So you think you'd survive the Ice Age, that you'd step out of your climate-controlled apartment, walk into the wilderness with a flint rock and a can-do attitude, and just vibe with the mammoths. Think again. The Ice Age wasn't a winter wonderland. It was a never-ending survival challenge, where every breath you took was sponsored by frostbite. This was a time when food didn't nourish you, it tried to escape you, and the only thing cozier than your cave was the inside of a dire wolf. There were no grocery stores, no Gore-Tex jackets, and no delivery apps to bring you soup when you were dying of a fever. In fact, dying was sort of the default. Welcome to the Pleistocene, nature's frozen middle finger, to comfort, convenience, and anyone without at least 3 layers of mammoth fur. Let's find out why you absolutely categorically would not last a day as an Ice Age hunter-gatherer. Hello travelers, histories do not always need to be boring. You can rest here and listen to hilarious histories to drift off to sleep. Before we continue, leave a comment to let me know when and where you are listening to this, and hit the subscribe button, but only if you enjoy what I do here. Let's begin. The first thing you notice is the cold. Not the kind of cold that makes you shiver. No, this is the kind of cold that feels personal. Like winter itself woke up early just to punch you in the lungs. You peel open your crusty eyelids inside a pitch-black cave, wrapped in what can only be generously described as a mammoth hide burrito. It smells like wet dog old cheese, and maybe a hint of prehistoric foot fungus. Comfort? Not a thing. Bedsheets are an 18000 year later invention. Your mattress is a pile of leaves, bones, and whatever fur you didn't eat last week. There's no gentle sunrise streaming through your window. There's no window. What you have is an open rock hole where wind screams like it's auditioning for a horror movie. Welcome to your morning. Coffee? Not invented. Alarm clock? Just the internal dread of knowing you need to find food or die trying. You try to sit up, but your joints sound like someone stepping on dry twigs. Congratulations. You have Ice Age arthritis at the ripe old age of 24, which is basically senior citizenship in prehistoric years. You're not even fully awake, and already you're in survival mode. First thought, am I still alive? Second thought, where is my left foot, and why can't I feel it? Frostbite has entered the chat. You glance around. The cave is shared with your tribe, which includes one snoring elder, whose lungs sound like a dying bison, 2 toddlers covered in soot and mammoth grease, your cousin, who's already sharpening a rock and muttering about hunting something before noon. You, meanwhile, are trying not to cry because your breath is visible, and your toes are possibly dead. There's no time to ease into the day. Every second spent lying around is a second closer to starvation. And breakfast? That's not a meal. It's a desperate archaeological dig through snow and dirt for anything vaguely chewable. If you're lucky, someone roasted a root over the fire last night and forgot to eat it. If you're unlucky, well, good thing you're already dressed in survival mode, which is to say, naked under a scratchy animal pelt that barely covers your dignity or your butt. Clothing isn't fashionable here. It's functional, itchy, and extremely dead. Your outfit is made of mammoth, stitched together with the tendon of something you'd rather not ask about. It weighs as much as a mid-sized dog and smells like every bad decision your ancestors ever made. But hey, it's better than frostbite on parts of the body you'd like to keep. You shiver your way toward the dying embers of last night's fire. You poke at it with a stick, hoping it reignites like some sort of prehistoric miracle. It doesn't. Now your fingers are cold, and you've got soot under your nails. Welcome to the Ice Age morning routine. Wake up, contemplate existence, freeze. Try not to die. You head outside, because, well, you have to. The outside world is an unfiltered documentary in high-definition suffering. The snow is knee-deep, the wind is slicing through your mammoth fur robe like it's made of paper, and the only sound is the ominous howling of something very large, very hungry, and probably starring in your obituary. And let's be clear, there's no morning routine as you know it. No brushing your teeth, no hot shower, no bowl of cereal. Toothbrushes haven't been invented. Soap, laughable. Water, it's frozen. And the idea of sitting down to eat something that didn't involve a deathmatch with nature, absolutely hilarious. The air is thin, sharp, and filled with the kind of silence that usually comes before an avalanche or a predator leaping from the bushes. Your breath clouds in front of you like a ghost escaping your lungs, and you begin walking. Where? You're not sure. But walking keeps the blood moving. and if you stand still too long, your body will simply give up and start turning into an ice sculpture. As you trudge through the snow, your stomach growls. Not politely, it roars like it's trying to scare off a rival predator, but there's nothing to eat. Nothing visible. Just white for miles and trees that look like they've been dead since the dinosaurs. You bend down, dig around, and find a questionable root. It's small, grey, and possibly alive in the sentient fungal way. You eat it anyway. It tastes like despair. Back in your cave, your clan is already preparing for the hunt. You, on the other hand, are just trying to remember what warmth felt like. You've been awake for 20 minutes, and you've already experienced sensory deprivation, muscle failure, minor hypothermia, and spiritual grief over a burnt stick of tuber. So to answer the question, why wouldn't you survive as an Ice Age hunter-gatherer? Because by 7 a.m, you'd already be halfway frozen, emotionally broken, and chewing on what might be an old piece of bark, wondering if anyone in the future would invent something called pants. So you've made it through the morning without becoming a prehistoric popsicle. Congratulations. Now let's talk about your house, or rather the place you desperately try not to die in every night. Your home is a cave, not a cozy little hobbit hole with a round door and a stocked pantry. No, this is a jagged hole in a rock face that echoes like a cathedral and smells like something was murdered in there last week, which it probably was. Cave life is the Ice Age version of winning the lottery, except the prize is damp walls, questionable airflow, and frequent visits from carnivores, and it leaks constantly. You never really think about roofing until you're lying under a dripping stalactite for the 5th night in a row, wondering if your internal organs can get trench foot. The ground is always wet, always. No matter how many furs you lay down, or how much you try to sweep with a bush branch, your sleeping area feels like the inside of a boot that's been left in a swamp. The acoustics are wild too. Every snore, cough and stomach growl bounces around the cave like a prehistoric symphony of human suffering. You whisper one thing to your cousin in the corner, and your uncle 3 furs over hears it and says, "What did you say about my hunting technique, you little twig?" Privacy. The concept hasn't been invented. You want alone time? Good luck finding a tree that isn't already claimed by a pack of wolves. And let's talk about wildlife, because while the cave is your shelter, it's also prime real estate for other creatures with more teeth and fewer morals, like the saber-toothed cat. Yes, the one with teeth the size of steak knives, and the attitude of a house cat that skipped breakfast. You don't own the cave. You borrow it temporarily, and with constant paranoia. Every night is a roll of the dice. Will you be warm and safe? Or will you wake up to glowing eyes in the dark and the soft sound of claws tapping stone? You know those cute cave paintings we found thousands of years later? Yeah, that wasn't art class. That was a warning sign. Don't sleep here. Grog got eaten. But we didn't listen. Because when you're an Ice Age human, your housing options are cave with the risk of becoming bear food, outside, where the air hurts your face and the wolves don't knock. And sometimes, you didn't even get a cave. If the local saber-tooth family refused to vacate the premises, they have excellent squatters' rights. You were stuck with makeshift shelters. This included animal hide tents that flapped in the wind like a sad drum solo, or structures made of mammoth bones and desperation. They were technically shelters, if your only requirement was not dying immediately. Temperature regulation? Non-existent. Your insulation was literally layers of animal fat, and layers of regret. In winter, you curled up around a fire you prayed wouldn't go out. In summer, you suffocated under fur so thick, you could technically be considered part mammoth. Every season came with a new flavor of discomfort. And don't forget about fire, the ancient miracle that kept you alive, and constantly on edge. Maintaining fire was a full-time job. You didn't just flick a lighter and vibe. You had to babysit those embers, like they were your firstborn. One strong gust of wind and poof, you're back to rubbing sticks like an idiot for 3 hours, while your clan passive-aggressively shivers nearby. Then there's the ambience. The smoke from the fire wafts around the cave like a prehistoric fog machine, turning your shelter into the inside of a smoked ham. Your eyes water, your lungs burn. But hey, at least the bugs don't like it. Probably, you're not actually sure. There are so many insects living in your fur. At this point, you've named a few of them. What about sanitation, you ask? There is none. The corner of the cave is the bathroom, which is a generous label for where nature just happens. And if it's below 0 outside and the nearest stream is half a mile away, guess who's not washing their hands today or tomorrow? or ever. Despite all this, you consider the cave home. Why? Because it has a roof, and because it's slightly better than the alternative, which is building a snow hut with no tools, no engineering degree, and the structural integrity of a melted ice cream cone. You're not picky, you just don't want to be devoured in your sleep. That's the bar, that's the dream. So yes, rent is free, but survival is not. You pay daily in frostbite, respiratory infections, and the creeping sense that every shadow might be a bear looking for a midnight snack. You live with your entire extended clan, 3 mouldy animal hides, and a haunting sense of dread. And still, somehow, this is the best case scenario. So next time you complain about your tiny apartment or the Wi-Fi being slow, remember this. Your ancient ancestors slept with one eye open, one leg in a puddle, and one hand clutching a pointy rock, just in case the neighbors decided to stop by. Ah, fire. Glorious. Life-saving, flesh-roasting fire. In the Ice Age, fire isn't just helpful, it's the thin, flickering line between alive and miserable, and frozen into a human popsicle. It cooks your food, scares off predators, gives you light, and stops your extremities from falling off. It's the closest thing to a miracle your Ice Age brain can comprehend. But before you start strutting around like you're some prehistoric Prometheus, let's talk about actually making fire. You've seen movies. Someone rubs 2 sticks together for 5 seconds and boom, there's a roaring campfire. Ha ha ha. No, that's cinematic propaganda. In reality, fire making is a soul-destroying process involving friction, disappointment, and more smoke inhalation than a chimney sweep convention. You don't just strike a match. What's a match? Or click a lighter. What's a lighter? You have to summon fire, like it's an angry spirit that only appears if you suffer enough first. Let's walk through the steps. Step 1. Find dry wood. This sounds simple until you remember it's the Ice Age, and everything is wet, cold, or frozen solid. The wood you find is either rotting, frozen, or currently being peed on by an elk. But fine. Let's say you get lucky. You gather some reasonably dry sticks and a bit of bark. That bark will serve as your tinder bundle, or as you'll soon call it, that thing I screamed at for 2 hours. Step 2. Friction. You take one stick and twirl it against another, using the bow drill method. What's a bow drill? It's a string tied to a bent stick that you spin back and forth, like a tiny lumberjack violin. Sounds doable, right? Until your hands are numb, the string breaks, and the stick keeps flying into your eyeball every 10 seconds. But let's say you power through. Your forearms are burning, you're sweating through your mammoth hide tunic, and your family is staring at you like they'd really prefer not to freeze to death tonight. Suddenly, smoke. Glorious. Wispy smoke. Your heartbeat spikes. This is it. Fire is coming. Spoiler alert. No, it's not. That smoke is just your stick, politely telling you it's slightly warm. It's not an ember yet, and if you stop spinning for even a second, you have to start all over. You keep going. You whisper to the bark. You promise to name your first child Tinder. You offer up your sanity as sacrifice. Eventually, miraculously, an ember forms. A tiny glowing ember. It's your baby. You cradle it like a newborn, gently blowing on it, with the hope and terror of a parent sending their child to kindergarten. You place it in your bundle of bark and dried grass, and you blow and blow and blow. Now your entire face is covered in soot, and your lungs are full of prehistoric lint. But then, full mump, a spark catches. You scream. Your clan screams. Everyone starts dancing like they just won a prehistoric lottery. You did it. You made fire. Of course, you immediately accidentally drop it on your own foot, burn your best pelt, and spend the next hour slapping flaming twigs into the dirt, while your cousin yells, "Not again." But you still made fire, and that makes you a god among hunter-gatherers. Let's take a moment to appreciate just how important this miracle is. Without fire, you're not cooking food, you're gnawing on cold mammoth sushi, and hoping not to get a side of parasites. You're not staying warm, you're shivering under 5 layers of fur, wondering if your nose is still attached. You're not warding off predators, you're just marinating in your own fear, until a dire wolf takes a bite. With fire, though, you've got light, heat, safety, and even the ability to invent the concept of chilling with your clan around a campfire. This is where Ice Age storytelling is born. You and your people gather around the flame, grunt about the mammoth that got away, make fun of Glog for tripping over a tree root, and draw weird things on cave walls just to pass the time. Fire gives you culture, baby. Now, keeping fire going, that's its own nightmare. You can't just make one fire and walk away. You have to feed it constantly. Like a clingy, flaming toddler. More wood, more kindling, more blowing, and God forbid it rains or snows, because then, back to stick-rubbing purgatory. Oh, and sometimes you try to store embers in hollowed-out dung, or carry a burning branch from one camp to another. That works until you trip, drop the fire into a snowdrift, and everyone starts questioning whether you're cursed. But still, you try again and again, because fire is life. And you, an Ice Age human with cracked hands and terrible posture, are determined to wield it. So next time you light your gas stove with the push of a button, or flick your Zippo like you're in a music video, just remember, your ancient ancestors had to spin sticks until their soul left their body. And sometimes, just for fun, they set their own leg hair on fire in the process. Welcome to the miracle of survival, one blister at a time. So, you want dinner, and not just any dinner. You want mammoth, a 10-ton, hair-covered, prehistoric behemoth that's roughly the size of a bus, with giant tusks, thick hide, and a personal grudge against small creatures with spears. That's you, by the way. The plan, simple. Gather your equally cold, equally desperate hunter-gatherer friends, grab a few pointy sticks, and yell really loud. What could go wrong? Everything. Everything could go wrong. Let's start with the basics. The woolly mammoth is the Ice Age equivalent of a walking tank. It's covered in a wool coat thicker than your entire wardrobe. Its hide can take a hit from a spear like it's a mosquito bite. Its tusks can casually yeet you into next week. And worst of all, it remembers. Mammoths have excellent memory. And if you mess this up, it might just come back tomorrow to trample you for fun. But you don't have a choice. It's winter, you're starving, and you haven't had a decent protein intake since the time someone accidentally caught a squirrel in their loincloth. So off you go, into the snow, with a team of hypothermic optimists and a bag full of regret. Now forget stealth. You're not sneaking up on anything wearing fur boots and wheezing like a haunted accordion. The plan is to use cooperative hunting, which is a fancy way of saying run around in circles and hope the mammoth trips. Your job? Get close enough to throw a spear at this mountain of meat without being turned into a fleshy snow angel. Sounds brave, right? Until you remember your spear is just a stick with a rock tied to it. It's not aerodynamic. It's not balanced. It's basically prehistoric lawn furniture. You line up, your heart racing, sweat freezing on your forehead. The mammoth is just standing there, grazing, not a care in the world. And then someone throws a rock too early and spooks it. Congratulations. You've now enraged 20,000 pounds of muscle and attitude. The mammoth turns, snorts and charges. This isn't a majestic gallop. It's a ground-shaking, tree-snapping, snow-exploding stampede. You're supposed to dodge, flank it, jab it in the side, and somehow avoid the business end of two giant ivory swords. Except what you actually do is scream, trip over a log, and lose your only spear. Great. Now you're armed with your fists, and a vague idea of teamwork. Meanwhile, the plan unfolds. Your friends are waving torches and yelling, trying to funnel the mammoth toward a pit trap. You know, the one you spent all day digging and camouflaging with branches, snow and wishful thinking. If, and it's a big if, you manage to guide the mammoth into that trap, you might have a chance. But mammoths aren't stupid. They can smell a scam. It slows down, hesitates, and then goes around the trap entirely because, surprise, it doesn't want to die today. Time for plan B. Throw spears and hope something important gets poked. This is where you discover that hitting a moving target while running, screaming, and crying is a lot harder than you thought. Your spear bounces off its rump like a snowball. Your friend manages to jab it in the leg. But now the mammoth is really mad. It charges again, straight through your hunting party, like it's bowling with humans. People are diving, yelling. One guy's stuck in a snowbank, and another is pretending to be dead just to emotionally clock out for the day. Eventually, someone gets lucky. A well-placed spear hits the mammoth in the side, deep enough to slow it down. Blood hits the snow. The mammoth stumbles, sways, and falls. Silence. Then cheers. Then someone yells, "Is it dead?" right before the mammoth twitches, and everyone runs again. But eventually, it is dead. And now the real work begins. because mammoths are massive. It takes hours to butcher one, and all you've got are stone knives, cold hands, and about 7 people who still think this thing is going to get back up. But once the meat is carved, the hide is stripped, and the bones are collected, your tribe is set for weeks. You've got food, fat, warm, clothing, tools, even a few new sleds if someone gets crafty with the tusks. This one kill means you won't have to chew bark for dinner tomorrow. Still, the process was chaotic, dangerous, and completely reliant on luck, weather, and not getting trampled. So the next time someone says, "We should go mammoth hunting again," you'll smile, nod, and suddenly volunteer to stay back and watch the fire instead. Because surviving the Ice Age isn't about heroics, it's about staying alive long enough to complain about it later. So mammoth hunting didn't go well. You nearly got trampled, froze half your foot off, and now you smell like prehistoric panic. Time for something safer. Gathering. How hard can it be? Right, just go into the woods, pick some berries, maybe dig up a root or two, and enjoy a nice Ice Age salad. What could go wrong? Oh, everything. Everything. Again. Because here's the deal. Every plant in the Ice Age is either mildly nutritious, completely inedible, or secretly trying to assassinate you. And the worst part? They all look exactly the same. You pick a berry that's red and juicy and seems harmless. Congratulations. That was dead man's snackberry. Your tongue goes numb. Your vision goes fuzzy. You have about 30 seconds to regret every decision that brought you here. So now you're trying to remember the rules your grandmother taught you. Something about don't eat anything with 5 leaves. Or was it 3? Or maybe that was the one to eat. Whatever it was, you can't ask her now because she died after eating something she thought was a wild turnip. Spoiler, it was a rock. You consult the only thing you've got for reference. Vibes. If a plant feels edible, maybe it is. If you've seen a rabbit nibble it, you think, okay, that must be safe. Wrong. Rabbits can eat literal poison and hop away fine. You try the same thing and your liver files for divorce. Also, let's not forget the roots. Ah yes, the thrilling sport of digging for food while hoping it's not a tubular death trap. You find something starchy and vaguely edible, take a bite, and instantly regret it as your throat feels like it's closing around a cactus dipped in acid. Meanwhile, mushrooms are just a gamble with God. Some will nourish you, others will introduce you to the spiritual realm, whether you're ready or not. One wrong bite, and suddenly you're lying in the snow, laughing at the sky, swearing the moon just winked at you, and then you stop breathing. The end. Now if you're lucky, and let's be honest, you're not, you might stumble upon something actually edible, wild onions, maybe some bitter greens, even the holy grail of Ice Age foraging, berries that won't kill you or make you see the spirits of disappointed ancestors. You rush back to camp with your prize, triumphant, like you just discovered fire. Everyone gathers around, eager. They take a bite, and their faces twist into expressions of betrayal. Congratulations, you found the most bitter, sour, chewy plants on Earth, but they won't kill you, so that's technically a win. And let's not forget the weather. You're not gathering under sunny skies and singing birds. You're out in the snow, wind howling like a banshee, digging through frozen ground with a stick, fingers going numb, and still trying to guess which patch of green might not be your final meal. Also, you're not alone. While you're out there poking shrubs, you're being watched by hungry wolves, saber-toothed cats, and other foragers who would 100% club you over the head for your mushrooms. You don't even blame them. You're thinking about it too. Let's not romanticize this. Ice Age gathering isn't some serene nature walk. It's an extreme sport. It's hiking, botany, and Russian roulette, rolled into one frosty bundle of anxiety. Oh, and don't even think about storing food. You found 10 berries that didn't try to assassinate you. Great. Now you have to fight off raccoons, crows, and that one guy in your tribe who definitely pretends to be asleep until everyone else is full, then sneaks your food. But you keep going, because as horrifying and humiliating as foraging is, it still beats hunting mammoths. At least the shrubbery doesn't charge at you with tusks. Yet, eventually, you do learn, not through books, but through trial, error, and a rotating cast of people puking violently next to the fire. You figure out which plants are friends, which ones are liars, and which ones make you think you're melting into the earth. In time, you become a walking encyclopedia of edible roots, berries, leaves, and fungus. You pass this knowledge on to your tribe, along with 40 different ways to say, don't eat that. But until then, every bush is a gamble, every mushroom a dare, and every bite is you whispering, please let this be food. Your outfit consists of stitched animal hides, some teeth, and vibes. Forget drip, you're just hoping your mammoth underwear doesn't freeze solid. Welcome to the Paleolithic runway, where high fashion is less about looking good and more about not dying of hypothermia. If you were expecting style, luxury, or even basic comfort, let me stop you right there. Your Ice Age wardrobe is a collection of furry regrets stitched together with bone needles and blind optimism. Let's talk materials. You don't have cotton, you don't have silk, you don't even have linen. What you do have are the corpses of animals you barely managed to kill or scavenged while someone else was being chased away by a bear. Mammoth hide, warm, heavy, smells like something that lost a fight with time itself. Reindeer skins, nice and light, but if you layer too many, you start to resemble a walking, disgruntled hay bale. And don't get it twisted. This isn't some sleek fur coat from a Paris runway. This is lumpy, patchy, slightly blood-stained survival couture. Your tunic, probably stitched from 5 different species. Your leggings, made from what used to be the inner thighs of a prehistoric goat. Your underwear, if you're lucky, it's made of rabbit fur. If you're unlucky, it's whatever was lying around when the blizzard hit. Now, how do you sew this mess together? Welcome to Bone Needle Technology trademark, the latest in 30,000 BC fashion innovation. Needles made of sharpened animal bones, threaded with sinew, aka dried out animal tendons. It's like trying to sew with a toothpick and spaghetti. You spend 3 hours poking your own hand more than the hide, and when it finally holds together, it immediately splits open the first time you squat to pee behind a bush. Speaking of which, there is no such thing as waterproof in the Ice Age. Every day you're praying your furs don't absorb too much snow, because when they do, congratulations, your pants are now icy, death trousers. Your boots, lined with straw, insulated with hope. If you step into a puddle, you may never feel your toes again. And footwear, oh, Ice Age footwear is a gamble. On a good day, you've got hide moccasins wrapped in more hide. On a bad day, it's just whatever's left of the mammoth. Soles made of bark, insulation made of old moss. You've basically duct-taped nature to your foot and called it a shoe. But wait, there's more. Accessories. Ice Age people loved a good accessory, mostly because it distracted from the fact that they smelled like week-old bison. Tooth necklaces, bone bracelets, maybe a feather if you were feeling spicy. Not for fashion, mind you, for status, survival, and maybe scaring off that guy who keeps borrowing your spear without asking. Want to be extra fashionable? Maybe add some ochre-based body paint or tattoo a bear claw on your bicep using soot and sharpened flint. Nothing says I'm sexy, and I might stab you with a sharpened antler. Quite like a prehistoric tattoo. And let's not forget the clothing maintenance. You don't just throw these garments in a washing machine. No, you scrape the dirt off with a flint tool, hang them near the fire, and hope the lice freeze before they breed again. Spoiler, they don't. Ice Age clothing is less fresh and more permanently haunted by a musk that whispers of damp regret. There's also no changing outfits. You wear the same thing for days, weeks, sometimes seasons. You smell like you've been slow-cooked in animal fat and rolled in campfire smoke. Because plot twist you have. Still, you gotta respect the ingenuity. These people made tailored parkas out of things that tried to kill them. They figured out windproofing before words like windproof existed. They layered skins, added extra fur around their neck and wrists, and padded their winter wear with dried grass for insulation. They knew which furs worked best in dry cold, which worked in wet cold, and which would turn into a wet mop the second it snowed. Yet, despite all of that, it's never enough. There's always a breeze, always a draft. Always that moment when you bend over to pick up your stone knife and feel the icy wind slap your exposed backside like nature itself is scolding you for being born. So you layer up. You wrap your legs in hide strips, cover your hands in crude mittens that make it impossible to hold anything, and top it off with a hat made from an animal's entire head. Is it effective? Surprisingly, yes. Is it horrifying? Also, yes. In the end, Ice Age fashion isn't about expressing yourself. It's about impressing death with how stubborn you are. You're not trying to look good. You're trying to stay warm, alive, and possibly intimidating enough that predators think twice before attacking the walking fur pile with a bone knife. And that's the Ice Age aesthetic. Woolly, smelly, questionable at best. But hey, at least no one's judging your outfit. They're too busy freezing their mammoth-sized butts off to our love in the Ice Age. It wasn't roses, chocolates, or awkward texting. Nope. It was more like, here's a chunk of mammoth meat I didn't trip over, or watch me dance without falling into the freezing river. Romantic, right? If you think modern dating is complicated, imagine trying to impress someone when your breath smells like a mix of campfire smoke and half-digested berries, your clothes are made of smelly animal hides, and the nearest romantic dinner involves a saber-toothed tiger, eyeing you both hungrily from the bushes. So how did Ice Age humans do it? Let's break down the prehistoric love game, Ice Age style. First rule of Ice Age dating: food is love. If you want to win a mate, you better show off your hunting or gathering skills, preferably with something big, meaty, and impressive. Imagine trudging back to camp, tusks dragging behind you, clutching a freshly killed mammoth leg. This is the prehistoric equivalent of showing up with flowers and a fancy bottle of wine. You don't have wine, obviously. You're still trying to invent that, so a giant, bloody chunk of meat is the best you can do. Presenting a mammoth steak wasn't just about the food, it was a display of status, skill, and hey, I'm strong enough not to be lunch. It said, I can provide, I can protect, and I'm willing to share this massive slab of dead giant with you. If you were a gatherer, your version of this might be a basket of edible berries or a stash of roots you managed not to poison yourself with. Still impressive, but let's be honest, the mammoth steak wins every time. After you've dropped your gift, it's time for the Ice Age version of a Tinder date. Dancing around the fire, no slow jams or smooth jazz, just primal stomping, waving spears, and making sure you don't accidentally knock someone into the fire pit. This dance served two main purposes: showing off your fitness. Can you move without tripping over your own fur? Can you swing your club without falling on your face? Can you roar convincingly? These are the moves that made hearts flutter, or at least distracted people from thinking about how cold they were. Flirting without words, language was limited, and yelling, "Hey, you're cute," probably sounded more like "Ugga, ugga." So, elaborate gestures, eyebrow raises, and wild arm waving became the prehistoric equivalent of slide into my DMs. But be warned, this dance was risky. One wrong step could send you sprawling into the dirt, losing your precious mammoth steak, or worse, your dignity. And if you fell, you had to hope the saber-toothed cat wasn't watching. Nothing kills the mood like almost becoming dinner. If you thought freezing weather was just a background annoyance, think again. Dating happened outdoors, and the Ice Age was a literal cold-hearted matchmaker. You couldn't just cuddle up inside with Netflix and hot cocoa. Nope. If you wanted to impress your crush, you had to brave the cold wind and occasional snowstorm. So surviving the date without your fingers turning into popsicles was an accomplishment. If you both managed to keep your toes and noses, that was basically a sign of true love, or at least strong willpower. Sometimes, impressing your date meant showing off your hunting skills with smaller, more manageable prey. Enter the dead rabbit. This gift screamed, I'm resourceful. I'm not just about big game trophies. I can provide the small, reliable stuff too. Plus, rabbits are fast and wily, so bagging one meant you were sharp, patient, and pretty sneaky. The only downside, the smell. Rabbits don't exactly come vacuum sealed. Carrying one around was like wearing Eau de freshly dead perfume. Hopefully, your date appreciated the effort, or at least didn't run screaming into the tundra. Words? Barely. Flirting was mostly grunts, smiles, and accidental eyebrow twitches. A grunt might mean, you're interesting, or don't eat that berry, it's poisonous, or I like your spear. Context was everything. You'd watch body language, like a hawk. Is that head tilt a sign of interest, or just a twitch from frostbite? Did they mimic your dance moves because they liked you, or because they tripped and wanted to make you feel better? Communication was basic but effective, a sort of prehistoric charades crossed with interpretive dance. Oh yes, even in the Ice Age, drama existed. With survival at stake, your whole tribe was watching your moves. Impress the wrong person, and you might end up in a cold war, or worse, a frozen war. Jealousy flared over mammoth kills and prime berry patches, and sometimes competing suitors settled disputes with a show of strength, or more often, with passive-aggressive stone throwing. And unlike today's online dating apps, you couldn't just swipe left. If you rejected someone, they might glare at you for the rest of the winter. Imagine trying to survive with your ex glaring at you every time you chop firewood. If all went well, no frostbite, no predator attacks, and your dance moves didn't cause a stampede, then congratulations, you'd made a successful Ice Age connection. This usually meant one thing: babies, lots of them, because having a big sturdy tribe increased your chances of survival. The more hands to carry spears, gather food and fight off bears, the better. And let's be real, there was no time for awkward first dates. Mating was a survival strategy wrapped in the messy, beautiful chaos of prehistoric life. So yes, Ice Age dating was a wild mix of fire-lit dinners, awkward dance-offs, grunts and gifts that smelled like death. But amidst the frozen tundra, it was love in its rawest, most primal form. If you thought modern parenting was tough, try raising kids when the world is a frozen nightmare filled with saber-toothed cats, deadly rivers, and weather so cold it turns your nose hairs into icicles. Welcome to childcare in the Ice Age, where the motto wasn't childproofing, but more like child survive this or die trying. Babies didn't come with instruction manuals or safety gates, just a lot of fur, a hopeful tribe, and the occasional prayer to whatever gods might be listening. From the moment tiny cavemen and cavewomen arrived, survival wasn't a given, it was the ultimate challenge. By age 5, a typical Ice Age child had probably witnessed enough close calls to fill a modern horror movie marathon. 3 people trampled by a bison, a close encounter with a pack of wolves, and that time the fire went out for an entire day, which, by the way, was basically the Ice Age equivalent of we forgot to pay the electricity bill. Babies were carried everywhere, strapped to the backs of parents or tucked into makeshift slings made of animal hides, which doubled as impromptu chew toys once the infants decided everything was edible, including toes and fur. There was no baby monitor, so when the toddler started screaming in the middle of the night because a spider crawled on their face, parents either wrestled with the beast or just accepted it as part of life. Spoiler alert, spiders didn't stand a chance. Teaching kids was mostly done by letting them watch and mimic. Want to learn how to hunt? Great, now go watch dad wrestle a mammoth, and don't get eaten. Want to learn which berries are safe? Taste test at your own risk. And yes, many kids became experts in what not to eat by unfortunate trial and error. The local equivalent of a playground wasn't a jungle gym, but the dangerous outdoors, where every rock, river, and animal could be the end of you. Discipline? Forget timeouts or grounding. If a kid was reckless, their punishment was usually a stern look from the tribe's elders, and a swift reminder that wandering off alone could mean becoming lunch for the nearest predator. The stakes were high, and the lessons were learned fast. Crying didn't get you a pacifier. It got you picked up quickly, preferably away from the teeth of a hungry cave lion. Despite all this, Ice Age parents found moments to smile, mostly when the kids managed not to break anything, not get frostbite, and even helped with simple tasks like gathering firewood or chasing off curious predators. Childhood was a crash course in resilience, with a side of hope you don't get trampled. In short, raising a tiny caveman in the Ice Age was less about nurturing and more about praying you had a little warrior on your hands. Because in a world where every day was a fight for survival, childhood was as wild, unpredictable, and dangerous as the mammoths roaming outside the cave. Imagine breaking your leg in the Ice Age. You're not calling an ambulance or heading to a hospital with shiny machines and friendly nurses. Nope. Instead, your treatment plan looks more like rub some moss on it and pray you don't die. Welcome to prehistoric medicine, where the phrase better safe than sorry was replaced by better muddy than dead. If you thought modern medicine was rough, Ice Age healthcare was basically guesswork, herbal superstition, and a whole lot of crossing your fingers. The idea of anesthesia, forget it. The closest thing to numbing pain was either fainting from shock or gritting your teeth until your face turned purple. Injuries were a daily hazard, a misstep while running from a charging bison, a spear that went a bit too deep during a hunt, or a simple fall on the icy rocks. The response? Find some moss, preferably not the kind that looks like it could poison you, mash it up into a paste, and slap it on the wound. This was the Ice Age version of ointment. Scientists today think moss had mild antibacterial properties, but at the time, it was just sticky and green, so it must help. For fevers, the go-to remedy was even more creative: fermented mammoth milk. Yes, you heard that right. If you had a fever, someone probably handed you a cup of slightly sour, chunky milk. Not exactly the calming chamomile tea we'd prefer now. Drinking it was followed by a lot of yelling at the moon or other celestial bodies. Because why not? It might not cure you, but at least it felt like you were doing something. And don't even get us started on surgery. There was no such thing as a clean, sterile environment. If you needed to remove a nasty arrowhead or cut out infected flesh, the tools were rudimentary, sharp stones, bones, or bits of flint. The procedure, painful beyond words. The patient's survival often depended on shock-induced unconsciousness, which was kind of an accidental anesthesia, and the tribe's hope that infection wouldn't set in. Dental care? If a toothache hit, you were mostly out of luck, unless you were brave enough to pull the offending tooth yourself with a sharp rock or animal claw. And even then, there was a high chance of infection or a lingering bad taste for the rest of your days. Preventative care was mostly about staying warm, avoiding poisonous plants, and dodging predators. Hygiene? Let's just say bathing in freezing water wasn't on anyone's to-do list. Washing wounds might involve cold river water and a prayer, but soap was a mystery, and germs were invisible enemies no one knew about. Still, prehistoric healers did have some tricks. Certain plants and herbs discovered through trial and error, mostly error, were used to ease pain, reduce swelling, or help wounds heal faster. Willow bark, for example, contains salicylic acid, the natural ancestor of aspirin. Of course, it took thousands of years for anyone to figure out that chewing on some tree bark was the original headache remedy. Spiritual healing played a big role too. Shamans, or medicine men and women, would perform rituals, dance around fires, chant, and sometimes wave animal bones while trying to drive out evil spirits that were blamed for illness. Whether it worked or just distracted everyone from the pain is up for debate, but it sure added drama to the campsite. So yes, Ice Age medicine was a wild mix of mud, moss, mammoth milk, and magical thinking. It might not have cured everything, but it kept the tribe going one sticky, hope-filled day at a time. And honestly, surviving without antibiotics or anesthesia for thousands of years, that's some stubborn resilience right there. If you think modern winters are tough, just imagine living in a time when winter wasn't just a season, it was a merciless, eternal state of existence that seemed to have a personal vendetta against you. Welcome to the Ice Age, where cold wasn't something you complained about. It was the main antagonist in the epic saga of your survival. And spoiler alert, the Ice Age never lost. Picture this. You wake up, your breath instantly freezing in the air, your fingers so numb you can barely feel your own face, and your only source of warmth, the fire you painstakingly built last night, has turned into a sad pile of ashes. The fire going out? That's basically your version of the apocalypse. Without it, you're a popsicle waiting to happen. Winter didn't come with a warning or a cozy sweater recommendation. It was relentless and unforgiving, seeping into every bone, every fiber of your mammoth hide clothing, and your very soul. You couldn't just turn up the heat, or grab a cup of hot cocoa. No, your survival depended on keeping that fire alive at all costs, because once the flames died, so did your chances of making it through the night. And keeping fire alive in the Ice Age, that's a full-time job and a half. Wind, snow, and ice conspired like some cruel winter-themed prank squad to snuff out your hard-earned warmth. One wrong gust and your flame would vanish faster than your hope for a Netflix binge session. So you'd be huddled around the tiny spark, desperately blowing on it, like your life depended on it, which it did, while wondering if the Ice Age gods were having a good laugh at your expense. The cold didn't just make you shiver, it was an invisible predator. Frostbite wasn't just a scary word, but a daily threat, turning fingers, toes, and sometimes noses into useless frozen stumps. If you weren't careful, you'd wake up one morning with parts of you gone, like some unfortunate Ice Age version of a bad haircut. Food storage, forget about it. In the Ice Age, the freezer was nature itself, minus any temperature control or safety seals. Meat frozen solid might seem like a blessing, but thawing it was an adventure in stomach-churning smells, and the constant gamble of, is this still edible, or has it turned into mammoth-flavored poison? Spoilage wasn't just a minor inconvenience, it was a potential death sentence. A bad meal could lead to sickness, and sickness in a world where antibiotics were non-existent meant serious trouble. Even your clothing struggled with the cold. Your patched-together mammoth hide outfit might block some wind, but when the temperature plunged far below freezing, Even the best layers were like wearing wet tissue paper against a hurricane, and if your only pair of fur-lined boots got soaked crossing a river, that was basically signing up for a slow, cold march toward hypothermia. The Ice Age was also brutal on your mental health. Constant cold stress, sleepless nights shivering in the dark, and the endless struggle to stay warm would have any modern person reaching for the thermostat. But in the Ice Age, no heating system, no hot bath, no electric blanket, just you, your tribe, and the frozen wilderness trying to outlast you. Even animals suffered, but they had fur and natural adaptations. You had to invent solutions or freeze trying. Snowstorms could isolate your group, cutting off access to food and forcing you to huddle tight for warmth and hope. In the worst winters, entire herds of prey animals migrated away or died off, meaning starvation was as real a threat as freezing. So yes, winter was not just a season, it was an enemy, a constant challenge, and the ultimate test of your grit. The Ice Age didn't care about your feelings or your dreams, it wanted you extinct, and every day you stayed warm, fed and alive was a small victory against a world that was determined to turn you into a fossil. Welcome to the Ice Age version of Survivor Natural Edition, where everything wants a piece of you, literally. Your world is a non-stop lineup of predators, each more eager than the last to make you their next meal. If you thought traffic was dangerous, try dodging saber-tooths, dire wolves, cave lions, and even your own tribe's cooking. Yes, survival in the Ice Age wasn't just about weather or hunger. It was a full-contact sport with nature playing the most ruthless referee imaginable. Let's start with the headline predators, because what's an Ice Age without a few apex beasts to keep your adrenaline on permanent high? Saber-toothed cats, with their trademark giant fangs that could double as impressive cheese cutters, were the neighborhood's unofficial tax collectors, collecting payment in terrified screams and shredded hides. These cats were stealthy, fast, and capable of taking down prey much bigger than you, including mammoths, which, fun fact, you were supposed to hunt, remember? If you ran into one of these big cats, your best move was to hope you weren't alone, and that your tribe's spear-throwing skills were on point, or, just run like your life depended on it. Because it did. Then there were the dire wolves, ancestors of today's wolves, but way bigger, meaner, and with teeth that could probably chew through your boot without breaking a sweat. These pack hunters were the Ice Age's version of a gang of really angry neighborhood dogs, except they weren't interested in your garbage. They wanted you. Running away might help, but if you tripped on a rock or froze in fear, quite literally, that was game over. Cave lions, cousins of the modern big cats, prowled the shadows. They were sleek, strong, and about as friendly as a grizzly at a picnic. Unlike saber-tooths, cave lions hunted by ambush, and if you were unlucky enough to be their chosen ambush, well, you'd probably end up as a spot on their fur coat someday. Their roar alone was enough to make you question all your life choices, especially the ones that involved not staying indoors. If these flesh-eaters weren't enough, you had to watch out for animals you might think are harmless, like the Ice Age fish. Sure, fish don't usually strike terror in the hearts of humans today, but back then, they were practically tiny piranhas with attitude. If you ever tried fishing with your bare hands, you'd know those cold water fish were less about swimming gracefully and more about biting first, asking questions never. And here's a surprise twist. The things most likely to kill you might just be the people you live with. Yes, your own tribe. With limited resources, tensions could run higher than a mammoth's back. A bad day hunting, or a cold night huddled in the cave, could turn friends into rivals faster than you can say, "Pass the spear." Plus, Ice Age cooking was a risky business. Raw meat could harbor parasites, and your attempts to cook over an open flame might result in anything from burnt offerings to food poisoning. Not exactly the recipe for a long, healthy life. Add to the mix accidents, falling off cliffs, getting trapped under a pile of snow, or slipping on ice, and you realize just how precarious your existence was. Every step you took had the potential to be your last, and your to-do list included not just finding food and shelter, but also dodging death at every turn. Even smaller animals could be dangerous. Venomous spiders and insects might have been less common in the freezing cold, but the risk was still there. One unlucky bite and you could be down for the count with swelling, fever, or worse, with no cure except time, and the hope that you didn't get worse. So what did you do? You stayed alert, trusted your instincts, and kept your weapons close. Spears, clubs, and sharp stones weren't just tools, they were lifelines. Every day was a battle not just against the environment, but against everything, with jaws, claws, or a bad attitude. Ice Age life wasn't a stroll in the park. It was a brutal obstacle course, with a finish line you really didn't want to reach too soon. If you're imagining Ice Age life as a rugged outdoor adventure with epic survival stories, think again. The truth is, most modern folks dropped straight into that icy prehistoric world would have a very short, very brutal episode titled How You Probably Didn't Make It. Spoiler alert, the Ice Age was not a friendly place, and it came with a kill menu so diverse it could overwhelm even the toughest YouTube survival guru. First up, frostbite. That charming condition where your fingers and toes decide they've had enough of the cold and just quit. Imagine waking up one day and realizing your nose is numb, your cheeks are frozen stiff, and your toes feel like they belong to someone else. Or rather, that someone else left them behind. In the Ice Age, frostbite wasn't a minor inconvenience. It was a limb-chopping deal-breaker. If your toes fell off, you weren't hopping into an Uber for the hospital. You were hobbling around, hoping you didn't trip over an ice patch or fall prey to a saber-toothed cat while trying to keep balance, and the infection risk? Oh, it was real. Without antibiotics or modern medicine, a nasty case of frostbite could spiral into gangrene faster than you can say, ouch. Then there's starvation. Yes, the Ice Age diet was pretty much eat what you can catch, or forage, or get really hungry really fast. Food was scarce, and hunting was hard. Mammoths were enormous, but also smart and dangerous, so hunting one wasn't as simple as waving a spear around. If you couldn't snag dinner, your body slowly turned on itself, using muscle and fat for fuel until you became a walking skeleton with a serious grumble in the stomach. Starvation was the slow fade-out option, but a guaranteed one if luck wasn't on your side. Speaking of mammoths, there's the classic get trampled by a mammoth scenario. Imagine being in the wrong place at the wrong time, like say between a charging mammoth and a cliff, and becoming an unplanned Ice Age pancake. These giant beasts could easily crush bones and squish dreams, and unlike in cartoons, you didn't bounce back. Trampling was an instant and very final way to check out of the Ice Age party. If you thought choking was just a modern dining hazard, think again. Undercooked squirrel meat might have seemed like a decent snack when you were starving, but it carried risks. Choking was a real threat, especially when you didn't have someone trained in the Heimlich maneuver. Plus, eating raw or undercooked meat could lead to parasites or food poisoning, turning a near miss into a slow and unpleasant death. Imagine trying to explain that to your tribe. Yeah, I'm fine, just dying from some bad squirrel. Accidents were everywhere, slipping on icy rocks, falling into freezing rivers, or accidentally poking yourself with your own spear during a clumsy moment were common ways to meet an untimely end. With no hospitals or ambulances, even minor injuries could become deadly infections. A small cut could turn septic, and without antibiotics, your immune system was the last line of defense. Add to all this the danger from other humans. Ice Age tribes weren't always the warm, supportive communities you might picture. Territorial disputes, fights over food, or even just plain bad luck could mean violence from your own kind. Getting injured or killed by someone you trusted was a grim possibility. Sometimes friendly fire wasn't so friendly, and let's not forget the mental toll. The constant stress of finding food, staying warm, and avoiding predators would weigh heavily on anyone. Depression, anxiety, and despair were probably as common then as they are now, except without therapists or hot showers to help cope. Mental health wasn't a luxury, it was a survival factor. In summary, if you were a modern human dropped into the Ice Age, your odds weren't great. Frostbite might take your toes, starvation would gnaw at you, mammoths could squash you like a bug, and even a bad meal might finish you off. Every day was a delicate balancing act between survival and sudden, often unpleasant death. So why would anyone sign up for this gig? Because it's our story, the wild, brutal, and sometimes ridiculous saga of how humans survived against all odds. And as harsh as it was, those Ice Age hunters and gatherers paved the way for everything that came after, including heated houses, grocery stores, and that glorious invention called central heating. Let's get one thing straight before we start. Ice Age hunter-gatherers were not your average weekend hikers. They weren't just wandering around in fur bikinis, hoping for the best. No, These folks were survival machines, biological overachievers who had grit, instincts, and an iron stomach that could swallow beetles without even flinching. Meanwhile, here we are in 2025, with Wi-Fi, heated seats, and anxiety over whether the barista spelled our name right on the cup. Spoiler, they had a hustle we can barely comprehend. So how did these prehistoric pros actually pull off survival in a world that wanted to freeze, trample, or eat them at any given moment? The answer boils down to three big things: brainpower, community, and a stomach that laughs in the face of EUO. First up, brainpower. It's easy to picture these ancient humans as just brawny cave people waving clubs around, but they were actually pretty darn clever. Creating tools wasn't just about grabbing a rock and hoping it works. It involved planning, experimenting, and learning from mistakes. Sharpened stones, bone needles for sewing, and clever traps didn't just appear overnight. Each new invention was a survival upgrade. They understood their environment, tracked animal migrations, and read the weather better than most of us read a smartphone app. If you think checking the weather on your phone is advanced, try reading the sky when your life depends on it. Speaking of planning, the social aspect was crucial. Hunter-gatherers weren't lone wolves. They lived in groups that shared food, cared for each other, and worked together like a finely tuned, if occasionally chaotic, team. Cooperation was survival currency. When hunting mammoths, for instance, it took coordination and trust. Someone had to distract the beast, while others attacked from behind, and someone else was on lookout for predators. Imagine organizing that kind of group strategy without texting or walkie-talkies. All you had were gestures, grunts, and probably a lot of enthusiastic pointing. Their social skills? Top tier. Now let's talk about food, because surviving on a diet of roots, bugs, and sometimes questionable meat requires a stomach tougher than your average food critic. These humans developed an ironclad tolerance for whatever nature threw at them. Beetles, bring it on. Grubs, delicious, if you squint. They knew which plants were safe, which were poisonous, and which ones just tasted like a nightmare but could keep you alive. And when fresh kills were scarce, they didn't waste a crumb. Every part of the animal was used. Meat, hide, bones, even the stomach contents sometimes, because waste was a death sentence. Hunters and gatherers also understood that survival wasn't just about brute strength or speed. It was about patience, observation, and adaptation. Tracking an animal for days, setting traps, or waiting for the right season to gather berries meant playing the long game. Modern life's instant gratification, not in the Ice Age. You had to earn every bite, every warm fire, every dry piece of fur. Mental toughness also deserves a shout-out. Imagine staring down a saber-toothed cat, or a pack of dire wolves, and not losing your mind. Or coping with days, sometimes weeks of freezing weather, no food, and no hope, except the stubborn refusal to become extinct. This wasn't just survival, it was a daily act of defiance against a hostile planet. And when things got truly dark, they had rituals, stories, and community bonds to keep their spirits up. Humans weren't just biological survivors, they were emotional warriors. Of course, not every day was a grand victory. They had failures, plenty of them. But what set them apart was the ability to learn and try again. One bad hunt didn't mean game over. They adapted tools, tactics, and even social structures to improve chances the next day. That resilience is something we can all respect, especially when the biggest crisis we face might be a slow Wi-Fi connection. In the end, hunter-gatherers were built different. They survived Ice Age hellscapes, armed with little more than wit, community, and a stomach that laughed at the idea of gross. While we binge-watch survival shows from our cozy couches, they were living it, day in and day out. So next time you complain about a cold shower or a bad meal, remember those ancient humans had it way worse, and they still made it through. So here we are, at the end of our frosty journey through the Ice Age, and I've got one final message for you. If you were thinking, yeah, I could totally survive that, well, bless your optimistic heart. But let's be real. You, my friend, are built for delivery apps, not spearing a reindeer at dawn while your toes freeze off. Think about it. Your morning routine probably involves scrolling through Instagram in a heated house, sipping on a coffee that magically appears thanks to some clever machine. Meanwhile, Ice Age folks were waking up to minus temperatures that could turn your latte into a popsicle before you even finish your first sip. Their alarm clock was the growl of a hungry predator, or the bitter sting of frostbite creeping up their nose. So if your biggest survival challenge today is deciding between avocado toast or cereal, you're already ahead of the game. Sort of. Sure, those hunter-gatherers didn't have Netflix or air conditioning, but they had something even better. Raw, unfiltered survival skills that would make any modern human break into a cold sweat. They had to navigate a world where the only warmth came from a precarious fire that could go out in a blink, where every meal was a gamble between feast and famine, and where the only fashion statement was hoping your stitched-together animal skins didn't fall apart mid-hunt. Let's not sugarcoat it. Surviving the Ice Age was like being stuck in the ultimate hardcore reality show, without commercial breaks or an easy way to vote yourself off. There were no cheat codes, no skip intro buttons, and definitely no popsicles on demand. The rules were simple: stay warm, don't get eaten, and pray your spear doesn't snap when you're charging at a 10-ton mammoth. And while it's tempting to romanticize this prehistoric era as some epic adventure filled with noble hunts and heroic battles against giant beasts, the truth is much grittier. It was cold, exhausting, and often downright terrifying. You weren't just fighting nature, you were fighting every single day to avoid becoming a frozen footnote in history. So what's the takeaway here? Appreciate the comfort of your heated home, the convenience of modern medicine, and the luxury of being able to complain about Wi-Fi speed instead of worrying about whether you'll survive the night. Sure, you might not have a spear or a fur pelt, but you've got something that Ice Age hunter-gatherers could only dream of: the chance to live without the constant fear of turning into a snack for something with sharper teeth than you. In other words, stay warm, stay home, and maybe send a thank you text to the ancestors who were brave enough and crazy enough to survive the Ice Age, so you could binge watch this video in peace. Because if you think that sounds easy, well, you're built for modern life, not Ice Age strife. Up next, if you're feeling adventurous and a little less frozen, we can dive into other wild chapters of history, where survival meant something else entirely, like surviving medieval feasts without food poisoning or keeping your sanity during Viking raids. But for now, grab a blanket, a hot drink, and maybe a pizza delivery number on speed dial. You've earned it. And remember, the Ice Age doesn't just want you extinct, it's rooting for you to stay exactly where you are, safe, cozy, and very, very far away. Welcome to Sparta. Now drop and give me 300 push-ups. So you've woken up in ancient Greece. But before you start rehearsing philosophical quotes or sipping diluted wine under an olive tree, pause. You are not in Athens. You are not anywhere near Plato, theatre masks, or relaxing symposiums, where old men argue about metaphysics while someone plays the lyre. No, you've landed in Sparta, and Sparta doesn't do lyres. Here the music is the clanging of bronze swords, the art is military formation, the culture, pain, discipline, and the occasional legally sanctioned murder. Welcome to the land where the national pastime is professional violence, and the dress code is oiled muscles and don't cry. Let's paint the scene. You open your eyes and find yourself standing in a dusty square, surrounded by men with chiseled jawlines and arms thicker than your entire torso. A child jogs past you, barefoot, shirtless, and juggling rocks while reciting war poetry. You, meanwhile, are panting, because you took the stairs wrong this morning. A grizzled old Spartan glances at you, notices your soft city hands and general aura, read a book before, and grunts. He doesn't say hello. Spartans don't do small talk. He just throws you a wooden shield the size of a car door and bellows, "Drop, and give me 300. That's not an exaggeration. In Sparta, fitness means being able to run 10 miles uphill in bronze armor, fight a dozen Persians before breakfast, and then carry your wounded comrade home while singing about honor. If you have asthma, a lactose allergy, or a faint dislike of bleeding, good luck. The Spartan motto is simple: come back with your shield, or on it. It's the kind of thing you'd put on a gym wall, if your gym also offered occasional sword combat and death by spear. Translated, it means, don't even think about losing, either win the battle, or die trying. There is no third option. Retreating? That's not just dishonorable. It's basically illegal. Your mum will disown you, the state will exile you, and your funeral will consist of people hissing at your name. You might be wondering, but didn't all Greek city-states value warfare? Yes, sure, many did. But while Athens dabbled in military arts in between inventing democracy and arguing about geometry, Sparta committed to it like a toxic ex to a bad idea. They weren't just a city-state, they were a military cult with housing. Everything in Sparta was designed to create the perfect warrior. The education system, pure combat training, the government, run by people who could snap you in half. The social hierarchy, based on who was most terrifying in battle. Even the architecture is built for defense. No fancy columns or open-air forums here, just tight corridors, strong walls, and enough weapons lying around to make an action movie jealous. And they took discipline to superhuman levels. Spartans didn't complain, ever. You could get stabbed in the leg and still be expected to make polite dinner conversation. Actually, no. You'd be expected to skip dinner and use the time to sharpen your sword. You know how modern motivational speakers say things like, get comfortable being uncomfortable. The Spartans said that too, right before hurling you into the woods to survive off bugs and pride. Still thinking about impressing them? Let's do a quick vibe check. Emotional sensitivity? Bad. Talking too much? Worse. Flinching when someone throws a spear at your face? Immediate social rejection. And don't get me started on your wardrobe. Forget about cozy cloaks or stylish tunics. Spartans wore the same rough red cloak every day. Why red? Because it hid blood. That wasn't fashion. That was function. You could be bleeding from 3 different injuries and still look battle ready. Personal grooming. Let's just say they liked to be clean, but not pretty. Oiling your body was fine. Helps with flexibility. But adding fragrance, that's a one-way ticket to ridicule. Hair was grown long. Not for vanity, but because a fine head of hair makes a handsome man look even more terrifying. According to King Agesilaus, imagine shampoo commercials, but for war crimes. So here you are, standing in the sun, holding a 20-pound shield you don't know how to use, with a stomach that hasn't seen carbs since yesterday. A Spartan trainer stares you down, measuring your soul for cowardice. You twitch. He nods like he expected as much. You'll die before sunset, he says casually, before walking off to wrestle a bear or something. And honestly, he's probably right. This isn't ancient Greece as you imagined it. This is Sparta, where fear is a weakness, pain is your tutor, and your best hope of survival is to immediately start doing push-ups until your arms fall off. Because if the wolves don't eat you, the training absolutely will. Let's start at the very beginning. You're born. Congrats. You've got 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and a whole lot of judgment headed your way. See, in normal places, babies get swaddled, kissed, and handed little wooden toys. In Sparta, you get inspected like a piece of military equipment, fresh off the assembly line. The government literally sends someone, yes, an actual state-appointed baby bouncer to examine you for defects. The criteria? Brutally simple. Are you healthy? Are you symmetrical? Do you look like you could one day crush a man's windpipe with your pinky toe? If the answer to all of these is a yes sir, congratulations, you're approved for continued existence. Go ahead and enjoy a brief nipple-based victory lap. But if you fail the vibe check, if you're too small, too frail, or show any signs of not becoming a death-dealing future adult, well, there's a mountain with your name on it. Mount Taygetus. A scenic peak with lovely views, crisp air, and unfortunately, a dark reputation for being ancient Sparta's unofficial baby off-ramp. Infants deemed unfit for military service weren't sent to a care facility. They were taken up the slope, and let's be blunt here, chucked, as in tossed, as in good luck, in the next life, kid. It sounds horrifying today, and it was, but to the Spartans, this was efficiency. No point investing food and training into someone who couldn't someday return with a Persian's head on a stick. Harsh, absolutely. But in their eyes, this was how you kept the gene pool pure, the army strong, and the babysitters very, very afraid. Now, assuming you pass the first test, and don't take a scenic tumble off a mountain, your reward is more terrifying survival scenarios. Because Spartan childhood isn't about toys, songs, or loving encouragement. It's about pain, teamwork, and absolutely no hand-holding. After a few short years of milk and being glared at by your father, you're thrown into the Spartan equivalent of daycare, the agoge. Think of the agoge as preschool. If preschool involved barefoot marches through thorn bushes, ritual beatings, starvation diets, and public humiliation. Oh, and wolves. Occasionally literal wolves. You enter the agoge at the ripe old age of 7, which is when your parents give you one last slap on the back and say, "Try not to die, son." From there on out, your life belongs to the state. Say goodbye to your mum, say goodbye to toys, say goodbye to comfort, and definitely say goodbye to ever sleeping in past sunrise. Training begins immediately, and it is not age appropriate. You'll learn how to fight, how to march, how to obey without blinking, and how to wrestle another child to the ground, using only your bony elbows and sheer hatred. Tutors don't hand out gold stars, they hand out lashes. It's a place where you're praised not for being smart, but for being silent while bleeding. Oh, and lying is totally encouraged. In fact, stealing is part of the curriculum. You're expected to sneak food, outwit guards, and take what you need to survive. But, and here's the catch, only if you don't get caught. If you are caught, you don't get punished for stealing, you get punished for failing at it. Spartan logic, folks. Now let's talk about the food. Imagine the worst cafeteria you've ever experienced. Now set it on fire and subtract half the ingredients. The agoge didn't just underfeed kids for fun. They wanted you to be hungry, desperate, and resourceful. Lunch might be a crust of stale barley bread. Dinner, a nice bowl of black broth, a culinary abomination made from pig's blood, vinegar, and salt. Yes, it tastes as good as it sounds, which is to say, it tastes like despair. And remember the wolves we mentioned. That wasn't metaphorical. Part of your coming-of-age challenge might involve surviving in the wild, alone for days or weeks. The idea was to teach you self-reliance, stealth, and how to sleep in a tree while not becoming dinner. Because if you couldn't outsmart an animal, how could you outsmart an Athenian? Now, during this entire time, your emotional support system is non-existent. Showing emotion is for the weak. Crying is for cowards. If you trip, scrape your knee, and don't immediately pretend you enjoyed it, you're getting whipped until you learn to smile while suffering. In fact, they held public ceremonies where boys were flogged for fun. These weren't punishments. They were competitions. The last kid to pass out won honor, and possibly lifelong trauma. Some didn't survive. That was frankly expected. But if you did, if you made it through the black broth, the wilderness trials, the beatings, and the chronic iron deficiency, you didn't get a gold medal. You got the right to continue training. Because you're only a teenager at this point, and the real horror show has just begun. So to recap, if you're born in Sparta, step 1 is not dying as an infant. Step 2 is surviving mandatory ultra-violence disguised as school. And step 3 is not even close to relaxation. Because in Sparta, growing up means one thing, becoming the kind of adult who can march 40 miles in sandals, murder efficiently, and hold in a sneeze during a spear fight. And to think, you were hoping for a juice box. Ah, the agoge, the Spartan educational system that makes modern boot camps look like spa retreats. This wasn't a school, it was a nightmare factory for children, meticulously designed to turn soft, impressionable little boys into emotionally repressed, spear-wielding war machines. You start at age 7. That's the tender age when most modern kids are learning to read and tie their shoes. But not in Sparta. In Sparta, you're forcibly removed from your family. And by removed, we mean ripped away from your mother's embrace, like a lamb headed to the world's most intense summer camp from hell. You're dumped into military barracks with a bunch of other trembling 7-year-olds, none of whom are allowed to cry. Crying is a punishable offense, so is whining. so is smiling without permission. Honestly, existing incorrectly in any way is grounds for discipline. Your new home? A cold stone building with no beds, no blankets, and definitely no plush toys. Your mattress? A pile of reeds you harvested yourself from a swamp. And no, the swamp doesn't close for holidays. And yes, those reeds are infested with bugs that see your skin as a buffet. Welcome to the Agoge. From day one, everything is a test. Your strength, your obedience, your pain tolerance, and your ability to endure public humiliation without blinking. There are no gold stars here. The only rewards are not being flogged, or being flogged less. The instructors, if you can even call them that, are more like personal tormentors. They don't teach math or writing. They teach endurance, silence, and how to kill a man using only your sense of timing and a sharp stick. You're encouraged to fight your peers daily, not in a supervised, controlled manner. Nope. It's more like a chaotic brawl pit, where the weak get battered and the strong get praised for being slightly less broken afterward. And let's not forget the older boys. They're assigned to mentor the younger ones, which in Spartan terms means smacking you in the face whenever they feel like it. You exist to be molded, which often involves being punched, kicked, or publicly insulted for failing to perfectly recite some state-approved poetry while bleeding from the nose. Then there's the food, or rather, the lack of it. You're deliberately underfed. The idea is to teach you to scavenge, steal, and survive. Hunger is constant. Your stomach growls louder than your battle chants, so you're encouraged. Yes, encouraged to steal. Bread, cheese, figs, whatever you can get your grubby hands on. But here's the twist. You're only rewarded if you don't get caught. If you do get caught, that's right. You're flogged. Publicly. In front of your peers. Imagine stealing a piece of cheese, getting caught, and instead of detention, your instructor says, "Nice initiative, shame about your technique," and orders 50 lashes. Welcome to Spartan logic. It's not about morality, it's about competency. You didn't fail by being bad. You failed by being bad at being bad. Spartans even turned cheese theft into a sport. One popular event involved placing a block of cheese on an altar, and daring boys to try and take it while older kids defended it with whiff. Think of it as capture the flag, except instead of a flag it's cheese, and instead of fun it's scars for life. And nights? Nights are their own special brand of horror. You don't sleep in pajamas, you sleep naked, because comfort is for philosophers and cowards. The floor is hard, cold, and riddled with sharp little objects no one bothers to clean up, and don't even think about asking for a pillow. The last kid who tried that is probably still tied to a tree somewhere, thinking about his life choices. And remember, you're surrounded by other kids just as traumatized and paranoid as you. These are not your friends, these are potential assassins, all of whom are also desperate to prove their worth. Sleep with one eye open because you never know when someone will decide that stabbing you in the leg might earn them bonus points with an instructor. The Agoge also introduced a charming little activity called the Cryptia. Once you got older, where particularly promising boys were sent out at night with daggers to murder helots, Sparta's enslaved class, as a way to keep the population terrified and the boys sharp. Yes, childhood assassination missions were an actual part of the curriculum. Still think algebra was hard, but here's the kicker. If you survive all this, the beatings, the starvation, the random attacks, the cheese-related trauma, you don't graduate to freedom or celebration. You graduate to even more training. You get a red cloak, and the lifelong obligation to be an elite soldier who can't flinch, cry, or ever, under any circumstances, say, "I need a break." Because in Sparta, you're not a person, you're a weapon, a tool for the state, a human spear with feelings surgically removed, and replaced with a burning desire to win wars or die trying. So the next time someone complains about school lunches or gym class, feel free to remind them, at least they didn't get flogged for cheese. In most cultures, body image is a personal issue. In Sparta, it's a public health crisis. Specifically, the public's health, and your body's role in violently preserving it. Here, physical perfection isn't just encouraged, it's practically legally mandated. Your body isn't yours, it belongs to the state. And if that body isn't gloriously shredded, you're not just letting yourself go, you're disgracing an entire militarized society that expects you to be part statue, part killing machine, all the time. The ideal Spartan man, built like a marble god that skipped leg day, exactly, never. Biceps, like coiled snakes, abils like stone tablets, thighs thick enough to block arrows. And this isn't just a standard, it's enforced. Daily inspections aren't just for armor and weapons. No, the state literally checks your body like a produce manager, checking melons for bruises. Too scrawny? Too soft? Not symmetrical enough? You don't get a gentle suggestion to hit the gym. You get public shaming, plus a hearty helping of mandatory beatings with motivational screaming like, "You shamed the walls of Leonidas's house." You think high school gym class was traumatic? Try standing half naked in front of your commanding officer as he pokes your abs and decides whether you look like a warrior or a wet loaf of barley bread. And there's no hiding. Spartan fashion is minimalist to the point of criminal exposure. The standard outfit is basically a glorified diaper. A red cloak, a loincloth, and confidence. That's all you get. No tunics, no armor off duty, and certainly no just chilling in sweatpants days. If you've got a weird mole, a wonky nipple, or a love handle, tough luck, friend. Everyone knows, and they will comment. Women? They're no less terrifying. In most ancient societies, women were encouraged to be delicate, pale, and quiet. In Sparta, women were ripped, loud, and more than capable of suplexing you into next week. Girls trained just like boys, running, wrestling, javelin throwing, and presumably bench pressing weaker men for fun. Why? Because a weak woman can't produce strong Spartan babies, and in Sparta, childbirth was war, and you were the weapon. The state wanted muscular mothers who could wrestle out a future hoplite without flinching. Spartan women were expected to give birth to sons who would grow up to die gloriously in battle, and they weren't subtle about it either. Their baby shower gift registry probably included iron dumbbells and combat midwife services. And these women judged. Oh, did they judge? If you were a Spartan man and your pecs weren't looking extra crisp that day, you'd get roasted by a Spartan woman faster than a pig on a spit. What's the matter, Lysandros? Your spear is sharper than your jawline. Spartan moms could roast a man to tears while in labor. Public shaming wasn't just allowed, it was a civic duty. In fact, Spartans believed that a well-shaped body was proof of inner virtue. If your muscles were slack, your morals probably were too. If you didn't maintain peak physical condition, the assumption wasn't that you were busy or injured. It was that you were lazy, weak-willed, or possibly a secret Athenian. And there's no cheating the system. No padded armor to fake those traps. No strategic tunics to hide the dad bod. If you couldn't lift your own shield without grunting like an asthmatic goat, you were mocked into oblivion. One of the most devastating insults in Spartan society was to be called a trembler, a man who wasn't just cowardly in battle but physically unimpressive. It was like being called a disgrace and a soggy noodle at the same time. Oh, and don't think old age gets you off the hook. Even the elderly were expected to stay in fighting shape. Grey hair didn't give you a pass to slack off. It gave you more experience to pass down by punching it into someone younger. If you walked with a limp, they assumed you broke your leg heroically. If you walked with a gut, they assumed you broke your spirit, eating too much honeyed cheese. But the worst fate? Becoming unfit and mocked by the youth. The ultimate Spartan nightmare. The same boys you once beat senseless in the agoge, now pointing at your sagging triceps and whispering, "He used to be somebody," terrifying. So unless you're already doing burpees at 4 a.m. while eating boiled barley and yelling for Sparta into a mirror, you're not ready for this place. Because in Sparta, muscles aren't just admired, they're expected, inspected, and possibly worshipped. Your body is your resume. Your torso is your philosophy. Your quads are your contribution to society. And if you don't look like you were carved by Zeus himself during a thunderstorm, well, there's always Mount Taygetus. So you thought maybe you could dodge the trauma by being born a girl in Sparta, slide through life doing embroidery, humming softly, maybe crushing grapes with your dainty feet. Guess again. Because while boys were off stabbing each other over cheese, Spartan girls were sprinting barefoot across fields, hurling javelins through the sky, and flexing on every other ancient culture's idea of feminine. In Sparta, femininity came with deltoids. See, most ancient societies had a sit quietly and bear children model for women. But Sparta said, why not raise women who could crush a boar's spine with a thigh squeeze? This wasn't girl power, it was girl dominance. Spartan girls didn't just run, they outran. They didn't just train, they outtrained. If there was a CrossFit Olympus, they'd already be regional champions. And it wasn't just encouraged, it was legally expected. A weak Spartan woman was a failed Spartan investment. The state needed strong women to produce strong sons, because in Sparta, motherhood wasn't a role, it was a military-industrial responsibility, no pressure or anything. Girls started physical training from a young age, running, wrestling, discus throwing, singing competitive songs about strength, probably while doing squats. They were fed proper food, unlike the boys, who often lived off hope and barley crumbs and weren't locked inside weaving halls. Why? Because Spartans believed weak women made weak babies, and weak babies were a national security risk. Your average Spartan girl could probably lift her own dowry. And speaking of dowries, let's talk rights. Unlike most ancient women who were basically living decorations in their husband's home, Spartan women had legal clout. They could own land, inherit estates, control wealth, and probably crush a tax collector's skull if he got mouthy. In fact, it's estimated that women controlled nearly 40% of Spartan property. That's more than some modern hedge funds. So while the men were off dying gloriously in foreign mud, the women were back home owning real estate, raising warriors, and roasting anyone who walked funny. And boy, could they roast. Spartan women were legendary for their verbal takedowns. They didn't just insult you, they delivered soul-crushing one-liners with perfect timing. They'd call out cowardice, flab and failure with the casual elegance of a war goddess who had read every ancient burn book. Come back with your shield, or on it. Wasn't just a phrase, it was the kind of motivational send-off your mum gave you right before you marched to your probable death. Imagine a society where your own mother judges your bravery based on how horizontal your corpse is. And poetry? Oh yes. Spartan women dabbled in that too. But not the roses are red, violets are blue kind. Their poems were epic athletic diss tracks. If you challenged a Spartan girl to a foot race, and she smoked you, which she would, you could expect a rhymed, metered eulogy for your pride within the hour, delivered publicly, probably while she was doing push-ups. But even with all that strength, Spartan women weren't brutes. They were celebrated, not sidelined. Their strength was admired, not feared. In fact, foreign visitors would often leave Sparta equal parts awed and deeply afraid, having just watched a 12-year-old girl casually launch a discus into orbit while chanting a hymn to Ares. And yes, beauty standards existed, but not the fragile porcelain doll nonsense. Spartan beauty was measured in physical health, strength, posture, and the ability to terrify a man into self-improvement. Their idea of attractiveness: sturdy legs, a powerful gait, and the ability to win a javelin contest while wearing minimal clothing and maximum confidence. They even exercised naked, just like the men. Why? Because Spartans had zero chill when it came to body confidence. If you couldn't lift, run, or wrestle in the nude, were you even trying? So no, being born a girl in Sparta didn't mean you were spared. It meant you were expected to be a beast, emotionally stable, economically powerful, and physically capable of bench pressing your future husband, if necessary. In fact, Spartan girls probably looked at the boys in the agoge and thought, "Ah, look at them, still crying over lashings." Then they went back to practicing discus throws in formation. And if you modern reader somehow ended up in ancient Sparta as a young woman hoping to take it easy, you'd be lapped in a race, body shamed by a 12-year-old, and drafted into a competitive childbirth program by Thursday. Congratulations, you've survived the agoge. You're scarred, shredded, and you flinch every time someone says the word cheese. You've been beaten, starved, insulted, stabbed probably, and somehow didn't die from hypothermia while sleeping on a pile of reeds. You're 18 now, technically an adult, emotionally a war-hardened cryptid. So naturally, the Spartans celebrate your coming-of-age milestone with a murder mission. Welcome to the Cryptia, Sparta's version of a graduation ceremony, except instead of throwing your cap in the air, you're handed a dagger and told to go commit state-approved homicide. Still think ancient history was boring? Now, let's rewind for context. Sparta had a problem. The Helots. The Helots were the enslaved class, conquered people, mostly from Messenia, who were forced to work the land, grow the food, and basically do everything Spartans didn't want to do, which, to be clear, was anything that didn't involve weapons, sweating, or dramatic flexing in sunlight. The Helots outnumbered the Spartans by a massive margin, Some estimates say 7 to 1. Imagine trying to maintain power when your entire society is one bad harvest away from a helot uprising and a nationwide wedgie. Sparta's solution: terror. Institutionalized, organized, annual terror. And that's where the Cryptia came in. Here's how it worked. A group of the most promising young Spartan males, usually the best Agoge graduates, that is, the ones who stabbed with extra flair, were selected to participate. They were stripped of normal citizenship for a time, sent into the countryside and told, blend in, lurk in the shadows, and kill helots, quietly. Yes, this was the test. No chariot races, no philosophy essays, just full-on secret police behavior with zero accountability. The rules were simple. Only carry a dagger, and a few provisions. Travel alone, or in small groups. Do not get caught. If you see a helot who looks strong, capable, or mildly confident, kill him. That last part isn't exaggeration. The Cryptia's job wasn't to randomly attack, it was to neutralize potential threats. If a helot had muscles, or seemed like he might one day dream of freedom, that was enough. Bam, dagger time. The young Spartans would hide during the day, then strike at night. Silent, calculating, and legally protected by the state, they learned how to move like ghosts, kill like snakes, and live like murder hobos for weeks on end. This wasn't just cruelty for sport, though it definitely flirted with it. The idea was to instill fear among the helot population and prevent uprisings. A little don't get too bold or a teenager might crawl out of the wheat field and end you sort of vibe. Spartan government officials even declared war on the helots annually, so that these acts wouldn't technically count as murder under religious law. Yes, you read that right. Sparta legally declared war on its own enslaved population every year, because even the gods needed to be looped in when your graduation party involves throat slitting. And if you were thinking, wow, sounds like a messed up episode of Survivor, Bronze Age, you're not wrong. Except in this version, you win immunity by eliminating the competition. Literally. Now, if you performed well in the Cryptia, meaning you didn't die, didn't get caught, and racked up a horrifying body count, you were rewarded with what? Respect, status, and the chance to enter full Spartan citizenship, known as becoming a Homoioi, the equals. Equals, in this context, means you're now eligible to eat at the adult murder table. You get a mess hall, a voting voice, and the right to spend the rest of your life shouting about glory while sharpening your sword on a boulder. But let's be clear, this wasn't normal even by ancient standards. Other Greek city-states saw the Cryptia as barbaric, even horrifying. What do you mean your teenagers disappear into the woods to kill enslaved people as a rite of passage? Athens was out there inventing democracy and writing plays about gods in awkward love triangles, while Sparta was perfecting murder internships. And of course, none of this ever really addressed the root issue, that the helots were treated like subhuman livestock and regularly terrorized to keep them compliant. The Cryptia wasn't just about building stealth, it was about maintaining a brutal, militarized social hierarchy. So yeah, you graduate by sneaking into farmlands under cover of darkness, ending lives with a knife, and returning home, having proven that you're emotionally dead enough to be trusted with Spartan citizenship. And in that twisted logic loop, you've made it. You're not just a survivor of the Agoge, you're now a full-fledged Spartan warrior. All it took was a few hundred lashes, chronic malnutrition, psychological trauma, and a solid stab-to-sunset ratio. Congratulations, you've passed your murder internship and become a full-grown Spartan warrior. You'd think this would be the part where you get to retire to a nice stone villa, sip olive oil under the Mediterranean sun, and write poetry about your emotionally complex biceps. Nope, you're still not done suffering. Welcome to adult Spartan life, a thrilling, action-packed saga of pig's blood soup, constant war prep, and zero personal space. Still living in the barracks? Bro, first off, you don't get your own house, or room, or even a decent corner. Even though you're now a terrifying adult, with multiple confirmed kills and thighs that could snap a donkey in half, you're still forced to live in military barracks with the same dudes you grew up getting flogged beside. And not for a week, not for a few years, until you're 30. That's right. 3 whole decades of snoring, burping, flexing, and aggressive male bonding with zero privacy. It's like a never-ending sleepover, except everyone's armed and emotionally repressed. Think of it as a frat house, But the hazing never ends, and the toga parties have been replaced with synchronized spear drills. Also, the floors are cold, and so is your soul. Black broth, a culinary crime. Let's talk food, specifically Sparta's national dish. Black broth. Sounds mysterious, right? Like something a warlock might eat under a blood moon? Spoiler, it's just as cursed as it sounds. Black broth, or melazomos, was a horrifying sludge made from pig's blood, vinegar, and salt. Sometimes pork bits were tossed in for texture. It was served hot, in bowls, with no seasoning, no bread, and absolutely no joy. To Spartans, this was peak nutrition. To everyone else in Greece, it was a bowl of literal nightmares. A visiting Sybarite, basically a fancy food critic from a rich city, once tried it and gagged. When asked how Spartans could eat such stuff, he replied, with the help of war, hunger, and desperation, Spartans didn't care. In fact, they saw this culinary torment as a badge of honor. The worse it tasted, the more manly you were for eating it. Want dessert? Too bad. Dessert is for poets and cowards, all war, all the time. And speaking of manliness, welcome to your new daily routine. Train, patrol, polish weapons. Do push-ups until your soul leaves your body. Then train some more. You thought the agoge was bad. Now you've graduated to constant professional warfare. Sparta didn't just prepare for war, it marinated in it. Your entire adult life revolves around being ready to stab someone at a moment's notice. Ideally while shirtless and glistening. You practice phalanx formations until your legs scream. You train in shield drills until your arms go numb. You spar with other soldiers, sometimes until one of you breaks a rib and politely pretends it didn't happen. You're basically a walking weapon with a six-pack, but you're not allowed to act like you know that. Modesty was a virtue. Flexing in the mirror. No mirror. Showing off in front of women. She'll out-deadlift you, remember? Romance. Rare. Privacy. Mythical. Now let's talk about your emotional life. LOL. Just kidding. Spartans didn't have those. Marriage in Sparta was weird. Men were encouraged to marry in their 20s but weren't allowed to live with their wives until they turned 30. Yes, the state actually banned husbands from moving in with their own spouses. Until then, if you wanted to visit your wife, you had to sneak out of the barracks at night, like a hormonal teenager. Imagine climbing out the window at 2 a.m. in full armor just to whisper sweet nothings and awkwardly climb into a haystack for 30 minutes of state-forbidden romance. Romantic? Maybe. Creepy? Definitely. Efficient family planning? Not really. Women, meanwhile, ran the households, managed property, and raised your children with the kind of intensity that makes CrossFit look lazy. Also, Spartan wives were known for their sharp tongues and sharper expectations. If you came home from battle without a scar, expect a scolding. Didn't die gloriously enough, enjoy sleeping in the barn. Weren't brave enough to insult an Athenian poet in public, divorce. Spartan edition. The state is your mum now. And finally, we must address the main theme of Spartan adulthood. You are not your own person. You live for Sparta. You bleed for Sparta. You don't even eat without Sparta's permission. Every aspect of your life is controlled by the state. What you eat, where you sleep, how you fight, when you breed. Your individual desires, irrelevant. Your hobbies, if they don't involve javelins or pain, delete them. Even your conversations are monitored. Spartans were trained to speak in laconic phrases, short, sharp sentences, with maximum sus and minimum fluff. If you say too much, you're either weak or Athenian. Want to write poetry? Too bad. Want to paint? Get out. Want to cry? Do it in battle where no one can see. So to sum up, becoming an adult in Sparta means enduring horrible soup, endless training, regulated marriage sneaking, and living with sweaty bros for most of your prime years, all while trying not to die in a battle that someone else started. Still think you'd last a day in ancient Sparta? What happens if you run away from battle? Running away from battle in Sparta wasn't just frowned upon. It was a one-way ticket to becoming the village pariah, the human equivalent of a wet sock at a hoplite picnic. While most cultures in history understood that, hey, sometimes self-preservation is important, the Spartans took the opposite approach. They decided that dying in battle was not just heroic, it was practically mandatory. Survival was great, but only if it came with a sword in your gut and your shield still in your hand. In fact, shields were symbolic. If you dropped yours in retreat, it wasn't just oops, it was whelp. Guess you're exiled from basic human respect. Spartan mothers were known to tell their sons, "Come back with your shield, or on it." That was not a metaphor. You either came home as a victorious warrior, or as a corpse being carried like a war-torn casserole dish. Coming home empty-handed because you panicked and tossed your shield into a bush to run faster. You might as well have stapled coward to your forehead. So what happened if you broke this sacred stabby contract and dared to run away? Oh, the state had plans for you. First, the cloak. Not just any cloak. A special, patchy, multicolored monstrosity that screamed, "I am a disgrace to Sparta," and probably cry during thunderstorms. You'd be forced to wear it around town. A fashion statement designed to make toddlers point at you and warriors spit at your feet. This was the ancient world's version of the Scarlet Letter, except instead of being judged for love, you were judged for not dying violently enough. Then came the silent treatment, and not just from strangers. Your own family could disown you. One famous story tells of a Spartan mother who was informed her son had died bravely in battle. She straightened up, nodded, and said, "Good. He was mine." But another mother, upon hearing her son had survived by fleeing, replied coldly, "He is not mine." She basically unfriended him from existence. No inheritance, no homecoming. Just the eternal awkwardness of knowing that even your mum would rather you be a ghost than a coward. Socially, you were radioactive. You couldn't hold public office, couldn't vote, couldn't marry a respectable Spartan woman. You became a trembler, a specific category of social outcast with a name that literally implied you were still shaking from your disgrace. You might still be alive, technically, but your life was now one long game of don't make eye contact. Why the extreme measures? Because Sparta's entire society was built around the idea that fearlessness in battle was the glue holding everything together. Every citizen was a soldier, and every soldier had to believe that their fellow Spartans would stand and fight to the death without flinching. The second you let someone get away with turning tail, you open the floodgates to 100 other scared teenagers going, "Well, if Thrasymachus got to run away and just got a bad cloak, maybe I'll try it too." Nope. Sparta wasn't about to let peer pressure work in reverse, so they made the punishment worse than death. Living with shame in Sparta was like being condemned to a slow-motion execution of your reputation. You'd attend festivals where no one spoke to you, stand in lines where people cut in front of you, be mocked by small children and middle-aged women who could probably beat you up. You weren't just disliked, you were an open wound on the pride of the city. And if you think someone could, say, move away to Athens and start over with a nice pottery career, think again. Even abroad, your shame followed you. Spartan reputation was legendary, and if you were known as the guy who ran away, you didn't get a clean slate. You got laughed out of symposiums by toga-clad philosophers with no abs and too much wine. There were even rumors that some disgraced warriors exiled themselves voluntarily, wandering off into the wilderness or foreign lands rather than endure the smothering humiliation back home. Others tried to win redemption by volunteering for suicidal missions, essentially saying, "I messed up once, now let me die so hard that everyone forgets." Sometimes it worked, sometimes it just ended with more disgrace, but now also missing limbs. Spartan society didn't leave much room for nuance. You were either brave or dead. Anything else, unacceptable. And that's the terrifying beauty of the Spartan mindset. It was ruthlessly simple. Loyalty, strength, courage, death. No exceptions, no excuses, no "I twisted my ankle and panicked." If you weren't willing to die for your city wasn't willing to let you live in peace. So next time you imagine yourself in a Spartan helmet, standing proud with a spear in the hot Mediterranean sun, just remember, if you so much as flinch at the wrong time, you're one bad cloak away from being ghosted by your own mother. So, why did they live like this? You might be sitting there wondering, why on earth would anyone agree to live like this? To have their entire life revolve around pain, discipline, and public floggings for cheese theft? Well, buckle up, because Sparta wasn't some random boot camp where people showed up for fun. It was a survival strategy, and an extreme one at that. Imagine Sparta like one giant military camp that just happened to have houses, farms, and a weird obsession with black broth. The city-state was carved out in the middle of ancient Greece, but unlike its flashy neighbour Athens, it wasn't trying to be the intellectual capital or party hub of the Mediterranean. Nope. Sparta's entire reason for existing boiled down to one terrifying goal: defend the homeland from every possible enemy, all the time. You see, Sparta was surrounded by potential threats on all sides, not just foreign invaders like the Persians or the Messenians, but also their own helots, the enslaved agricultural workers who vastly outnumbered the Spartans themselves. These helots were basically forced labor, tied to the land, and their resentment was an ever-present ticking time bomb. The Spartans lived in constant fear of uprisings because when you keep people enslaved and overworked, rebellion isn't a maybe, it's an eventuality. That's why Sparta needed every citizen to be a walking, talking war machine. They weren't just training for occasional battles or glory hunts, they were training for perpetual warfare and social control. Every Spartan was a soldier first, a citizen second, and a human being somewhere way down the list. The entire society was engineered to produce a population of highly disciplined warriors who could crush enemies abroad and keep their own enslaved workforce terrified and in line at home. Their answer to this existential threat: ruthless militarization, no compromises, no distractions like art, philosophy, or having fun. The Agogia school system hammered boys into shape. Spartan women were raised to be strong to bear stronger children, and even adult men lived like soldiers until their 30s. It was a total war society, where everything, education, family life, social norms, revolved around the sword. And here's the kicker: it worked. For centuries, Sparta was the envy and dread of the ancient world. They produced soldiers that could stand toe-to-toe with anyone. The legendary hoplites with their bronze armor and massive shields were unmatched on the battlefield. Sparta's military discipline was so fierce that even Athens, the powerhouse of culture and democracy, had to grudgingly admit Spartan warriors were a force to be reckoned with. Sparta's victory at the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans famously held off thousands of Persian invaders, became the stuff of legend. That story alone has inspired countless movies, books, and "This is Sparta" memes. But behind the glory lay decades, no centuries of relentless preparation, harsh discipline, and an unforgiving lifestyle. But here's the thing about extreme systems like Sparta's: they're incredibly fragile. The same rigidity that made Sparta a military powerhouse also made it incapable of adapting to change. Because everything was designed around war and control, there was little room for innovation or growth outside of that narrow focus. No art flourished here. Forget about beautiful pottery or epic poetry. No groundbreaking ideas or technological advances came out of Sparta. The city-state was like a machine stuck in a loop, churning out soldiers, but not much else. And when the times changed, when new enemies emerged, or the political landscape shifted, the Spartan system showed its cracks. Their obsession with maintaining a pure warrior class meant they had a dwindling population of actual citizens. Wars and harsh training thinned their ranks, and the social structure made it difficult to replenish numbers or incorporate outsiders. Without a steady flow of fresh, strong recruits, the military might that had once been Sparta's pride began to fade. Plus, the reliance on the helot slaves backfired. Constant revolts drained Spartan resources, and their brutal suppression tactics created enemies both inside and outside the city walls. Sparta's inability to reform or modernize politically and socially left it isolated and vulnerable. Eventually, Sparta's rigid, hyper-militarized society couldn't keep up with the changing world. When war stopped being Sparta's winning formula, when newer powers with more flexible, innovative approaches emerged, Sparta's dominance crumbled. The city that had once been the ultimate warrior society faded into the background of history, more of a cautionary tale than a model to emulate. So yes, Sparta lived like this: harsh, disciplined, brutal, because it believed that was the only way to survive in a world filled with enemies and threats. But like many extreme systems, its strength was also its weakness. The all-or-nothing, kill-or-be-killed mentality created unmatched warriors, but at the cost of everything else. In the end, Sparta's story is a lesson about balance. Sure, dedication and discipline can forge greatness, but without flexibility, empathy, and innovation, even the mightiest fortress can crumble. Let's be honest, if the wolves didn't get you as a newborn, the cheese-flogging competitions during your childhood probably would have broken your spirit by age 10. Even if you somehow powered through the brutal murder internship known as the Cryptia, survived years of sleeping naked on scratchy reeds in freezing barracks, and endured endless marches while your muscles screamed for mercy, your troubles wouldn't be over. You'd still likely lose in a javelin contest to a 14-year-old Spartan girl named Thria, who trains by chasing wild boars through the woods for fun. No, seriously, that's how Spartan girls got strong. Sparta was intense, violent, relentless, the ancient equivalent of signing up for a lifetime membership to a boot camp run by drill sergeants, who moonlight as medieval torturers. Comfort? Nope. Fun? Forget it. Modern hygiene? Laughable. If you like your life with soft beds, reasonable workloads, and a steady supply of clean socks, Sparta was definitely not the place for you. The Spartan way was built for warriors, not wimps. It demanded the ultimate sacrifice, your childhood, your comfort, your individuality, all for the sake of the state. So unless you're secretly dreaming of waking up every day to black broth and a volley of spears, maybe stick to watching the movie 300 from your couch instead. Because surviving a day in Sparta, that's not just tough, it's practically impossible.